One of the sub-skills that students have a real hard time with when they are writing notes or turning notes into sentences in their first drafts is the ability to put that into their own words. And we call this skill paraphrasing. So how do you take something that you're already reading or maybe listening about and modify it so that you clearly understand what you're saying and that you're presenting it in your own words. This also goes a long way towards avoiding plagiarism. So what I've done is I've chosen a sentence from one of the sources about 3D printers that we've been using. And this is a sentence. Let's read it out loud. For manufacturers of 3D equipment, the future of their nascent industry depends on broadening the appeal of their equipment by expanding its use and versatility. So this is a classic example of a really complex sentence. It has lots of moving parts to it. There's some fairly sophisticated vocabulary interspersed here. So if my task is to try to write about this in my own words, there are a couple of different moves I can make that will help me paraphrase. One of the first and the simplest is to think about replacing some of the more complex vocabulary with vocabulary that's easier to understand or vocabulary that's more like the kinds of words that I use. So what I've done here is underline a few of the words: manufacturers, equipment, nascent, so on and so forth. And here you see a restatement, a paraphrase of the first piece, but what we've done is simply substitute different synonyms or phrases for some of the words or phrases in the original piece. This is called semantic paraphrasing. So you're basically just replacing words. Now this isn't, at this point, a true paraphrase because all we're doing is substituting words. The structure is still exactly the same. Everything is being presented in the same order. But we've replaced manufacturers with makers. Instead of calling it 3D equipment, it's 3D printers. We've replaced their nascent with this new. We've kind of combined its use and versatility into one phrase, expanding their usability. So that's the simplest level of paraphrasing. On the next slide, I'm going to take this piece here, put it up at the top. So this is our newest version. But now I want to add some other aspects of paraphrasing to this. And that is, number one, I want to make sure that I understand the ideas that are being presented within the sentence. And I want to translate them into my own language. The other thing is, while I'm doing that, I also can do a bit of what's called syntactic paraphrasing. So that comes from the root word syntax, spelled S-Y-N-T-A-X. And the syntax of a sentence is the way it's been grammatically constructed. So what are all of its pieces? And if you have good syntactic knowledge, it means you have a good sense of the way English grammar works, you know, that you can sense whether the order of words in a sentence sounds right or not, okay? And this is the original piece was a pretty sophisticated syntactic piece. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to keep the synonyms, the simpler words, but I'm going to look at this and ask myself, what is it really saying? What are the ideas? And the ideas are that, you know, if 3D printers are going to grow, if more people are going to use them as time goes on, they have to get easier to use. People have to become more interested in them, and they have to be more usable. So one way of paraphrasing this is to not think about this syntactic order of words, but use my own order. And how do I say those concepts in my own words? So one example might be, as interest and uses for 3D printers increase, their use by more people will grow. The idea is the same. We're just using fewer words and different words. When you do syntactic paraphrasing, you might take a longer sentence and break it out into a couple of shorter sentences. You might, like we've done here, take a longer sentence and condense it into something shorter. So if I was writing about this idea in my draft, this is a sentence I might use. But before I even write my draft, I need to take information from the reading that I think is important, the stuff that we've underlined or highlighted, and first I need to write it into my notes. And note-taking is more unique than writing full-blown sentences, because when you take notes, you don't want to write a full sentence. It would become very cumbersome. So if I were to now look at this top piece and say, how could I write this idea in as few words as possible? How can I write it concisely? And since I don't have to worry about it being a good sentence, I could use abbreviations, I could use symbols, I could use phrases. So now if we're going to paraphrase this concisely for our notes, it might look something like this. 3D printers, growth in interest and uses, and notice how we've used a symbol here, equals growth in people using. So this is, it's much more staccato. It just gets the key ideas out. We don't have a lot of wasted words. So the point with paraphrasing is, if you just say to the students, write it in your own words, they often don't know how to do it. And like many things that are in Keys to Literacy routines, we want to break that task down and model it for kids and have them have practice. So this is how we started with original piece that was much longer, much more complicated, a lot of difficult vocabulary. We replaced the vocabulary words, we actually modified the syntax, and then took it another level and made it as concise as possible.